클릭해주셔서 감사합니다.
Hello everyone, I'm Raiseo JK Dae. Today we continue our series on the Japanese economy. In our previous videos, we explored how Japan rose from the devastation of World War II to become an economic superpower. We discussed the Japanese economic miracle. We discussed Toyota, Sony, Nintendo, and the global success of Japanese companies. And we discussed how many people during the 1980s believed that Japan might eventually become the world's dominant economic power. But today we are gonna examine a very different story, a story of bubbles, a story of speculation, a story of economic stagnation, and a story of one of the most famous economic downturns in modern history. Why did Japan's economic miracle stall? How did the world's most admired economy enter decades of slow growth? What were the lost decades, and what lessons can we learn from Japan's experience? Let's find out. To understand Japan's economic slowdown, we first need to understand just how powerful Japan appeared during the 1980s. By the middle of that decade, Japan seemed unstoppable. Its economy was booming. Its companies dominated global markets. Its trade surplus was enormous. Its banks ranked among the largest in the world. Japanese investors were buying assets overseas, and confidence was extremely high. Many people believed Japan had discovered a superior economic model. Some even predicted that Japan would eventually surpass the United States. In 1968, Japan became the world's second largest economy. By the 1980s, it had firmly established itself as an industrial and technological giant. Japanese automobiles were everywhere. Japanese electronics dominated store shelves. Japanese semiconductors challenged any American firms. Japanese corporations expanded across the globe. The future appeared bright, perhaps too bright, because beneath the surface, dangerous imbalances were beginning to develop. One of the most important events occurred in 1985, the Plaza Accord. The Plaza Accord was an agreement among major economies including the United States and Japan. At the time, the United States was concerned about large trade deficits. American policymakers believed the US dollar was too strong to address this problem. Participating countries agreed to help weaken the dollar relative to other currencies. As a result, the Japanese yen strengthened significantly. This created challenges for Japanese exporters. A stronger yen made Japanese goods more expensive abroad. Japanese policymakers worried that economic growth might slow. In response, interest rates were reduced. Credit became easier to obtain, borrowing increased, money flowed into financial markets, and this is where the story begins to change. Low interest rates encouraged investment. At first, this seemed positive. Businesses expanded, consumers borrowed, asset prices rose. Confidence increased, but eventually speculation began to dominate. People became convinced that asset prices would continue rising indefinitely. This belief fueled one of the largest asset bubbles in modern history. What is an asset bubble? An asset bubble occurs when prices rise far beyond their fundamental value. People stop buying assets because they are valuable. Instead, they buy them because they expect prices to keep rising. The expectation of future gains becomes more important than underlying reality. This dynamic can create a self-reinforcing cycle. Prices rise, optimism grows, more people buy, prices rise further. Eventually, speculation becomes disconnected from economic fundamentals. That is exactly what happened in Japan. During the late 1980s, stock prices surged, real estate prices surged, land values increased dramatically, financial institutions provided abundant credit, investors became increasingly aggressive, stories circulated about unbelievable property values. Some claimed that land beneath the imperial palace in Tokyo was worth more than all the land in California. Whether such comparisons were entirely accurate is less important than what they reveal. They reveal the extraordinary optimism of the era. Many people genuinely believed prices would never stop rising. Tokyo became one of the most expensive cities in the world. Land prices reached astonishing levels. Stock market valuations climbed higher and higher. The benchmark Nikkei stock index soared. By the end of 1989, it approached 49,000 points. Confidence seemed limitless, but economic reality eventually reasserted itself. Bubbles cannot expand forever. Eventually, investors begin to question valuations. Lenders become more cautious, growth slows, and confidence weakens. But when that happens, the cycle can reverse. Prices begin to fall. Optimism disappears. Investors panic, and losses accumulate. That is precisely what happened in Japan. In the early 1990s, the bubble burst. Stock prices collapsed. Real estate prices collapsed. Asset values declined dramatically. What had appeared to be endless prosperity suddenly disappeared. The consequences were severe. Many investors suffered enormous losses. Businesses faced financial difficulties. Banks discovered that many loans were backed by assets that had lost significant value. The financial system came under pressure. The collapse of prosperity prices proved especially damaging. Why? Because land and real estate had served as collateral for countless loans. When property values fell, collateral values fell as well. Banks found themselves exposed to large losses. Many loans became non-performing. A non-performing loan is a loan that borrowers cannot repay. As these loans accumulated, financial institutions weakened. The banking system entered a prolonged period of stress. In many countries, financial crises trigger rapid restructuring. Weak banks fail. Bad loans are written off. Resources move elsewhere. Japan's response was different. Authorities often moved cautiously. Problem loans remained on balance sheets. Financial institutions continued operating despite significant weaknesses. Some economists argue that this prolonged the adjustment process. Others note that policymakers were trying to avoid a larger financial collapse. Regardless of one's interpretation, the recovery proved slow, very slow. This brings us to one of the most important concepts in modern Japanese economic history, the lost decade. Originally, economists used this term to describe the difficult period during the 1990s. Economic growth slowed dramatically, asset prices remained depressed, investment weakened, confidence declined. Yet as time passed, the slowdown continued. Eventually, some observers stopped talking about a lost decade. Instead, they began talking about the lost decades, plural, because economic stagnation persisted far longer than many expected. One of the defining features of this period was deflation. What is deflation? Deflation occurs when prices fall over time. At first glance, falling prices might sound beneficial. After all, lower prices seem good for consumers. But persistent deflation can create serious economic problems. Imagine you believe prices will be lower next year. You may postpone purchases. Businesses observing weaker demand and may delay investment. Lower spending reduces economic activity. Lower economic activity puts further downward pressure on prices. This creates a difficult cycle. Deflation can become self-reinforcing. Japan struggled with this problem for many years. Inflation remained extremely low, so in some periods, prices actually declined. Economic growth remained weak. Consumer spending often lagged expectations. Business investment remained cautious. Deflation became one of the defining challenges of the Japanese economy. Another issue was demographics. Even as Japan dealt with financial problems, population trends were changing. Birth rates declined. The population aged. The workforce began shrinking. An aging population presents significant economic challenges. Fewer workers support more retirees. Healthcare costs increase. Pension systems face greater pressure. Economic growth becomes harder to sustain. Demographic challenges did not cause the bubble to burst, but they made recovery more difficult. Japan's labor force growth slowed. Domestic demand weakened. Long-term growth prospects became less favorable. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, policymakers attempted numerous solutions. Interest rates were reduced. Government spending increased. Economic stimulus packages were introduced. Public infrastructure projects expanded. Central bank policies became increasingly unconventional, yet growth remained disappointing. One particularly important development was the emergence of near-zero interest rates. Normally, central banks reduce interest rates to stimulate economic activity. Lower borrowing costs encourage spending and investment. But Japan eventually reached a point where interest rates approached zero. Once rates are already near zero, reducing them further becomes difficult. Economists sometimes refer to this situation as a liquidity trap. Traditional monetary policy becomes less effective. Japan became one of the first major economies to experience these challenges on a large scale. As a result, economists around the world studied Japan closely. The country's experience became increasingly important after the global financial crisis of 2008. Many advanced economies faced similar issues: low inflation, low interest rates, slow growth. Suddenly, Japan appeared less unusual. In some ways, it appeared ahead of its time. Despite these difficulties, it is important to avoid exaggeration. The phrase lost decades can sometimes create a misleading impression. Japan did not become a poor country. Infrastructure remained excellent, living standards remained high, public safety remained strong. Japanese companies continued producing world-class products. Technological innovation continued. The country remained one of the world's largest economies. The issue was not collapse. The issue was stagnation. Growth slowed dramatically compared with earlier decades. The extraordinary dynamism of the economic miracle disappeared. Many people who had expected ever-increasing prosperity felt disappointed. Japan had moved from rapid expansion to slow adjustment. Meanwhile, other countries continued advancing. South Korea grew rapidly. China experienced extraordinary economic expansion. Taiwan strengthened its technology sector. Global competitive landscape evolved. Japan was no longer the undisputed economic success story of East Asia. It faced increasingly capable competitors. The 2000s brought additional challenges. Globalization intensified. Manufacturing became more competitive. China emerged as a major industrial power. Japanese firms faced pressure in numerous industries. Then came the global financial crisis of 2008, and in 2011, Japan experienced another devastating shock, the Great East Japan Earthquake. The earthquake and resulting tsunami caused enormous human suffering. The Fukushima nuclear disaster created additional challenges. Recovery required substantial resources, yet Japan demonstrated resilience once again. Communities rebuilt. Infrastructure recovered. Economic activity gradually resumed. In the 2010s, new efforts emerged to revitalize the economy. One of the most famous was Abenomics. Named after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Abenomics aimed to stimulate growth through a combination of monetary easing, fiscal policy, and structural reforms. Supporters argued that bold action was necessary. Critics questioned whether the measures would be sufficient. Results remain debated. Some indicators improved. Employment strengthened. Corporate profits increased. Yet many long-term challenges remained. Demographics, productivity growth, public debt, and inflation dynamics. Today, Japan continues to face many of these issues, yet it also possesses significant strengths: advanced technology, highly skilled workers, strong institutions, world-class companies, excellent infrastructure, and substantial wealth. The Japanese economy is very different from the economy of the 1990s, but the legacy of the bubble era continues to influence policy and public attitudes. What lessons can we learn from Japan's experience? First, asset bubbles are dangerous. Rapidly rising prices can create the illusion of permanent prosperity, but unsustainable growth eventually ends. Second, financial systems matter. Banking problems can slow economic recovery for many years. Third, demographics matter. Population trends influence long-term growth potential. Fourth, deflation can be surprisingly difficult to overcome. And finally, economic success is never guaranteed. Even the world's most admired economies face challenges. Japan's story is not simply a story of failure, nor is it a story of success. It is a story of complexity, a story about how extraordinary achievements can create new vulnerabilities, a story about how economic miracles can encounter unexpected obstacles, and a story about resilience in the face of long-term challenges. The Japanese economic miracle transformed the country. The lost decades transformed it again. Understanding both stories is essential for understanding modern Japan. But our series is not over yet. In our next and final episode, we will examine Japan's future. Can Japan rise again? How is it responding to aging demographics? What role will robotics and artificial intelligence play? Can Japanese companies remain globally competitive? And what does the future hold for one of the world's most fascinating economies? We will explore those questions next time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Do you think Japan's lost decades were mainly caused by the bubble collapse or by deeper structural problems? I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.